Hi, I'm the PC Expert Amateur, and I'd like to take a look at NorKris's results and show you how those results relate to my results and what the differences are and how they balance each other and provide a more complete picture of how different cases can affect where you want to put a water cooler, especially in AIO, like what I've been working with. So first of all, I'm going to read some information to you that he wrote about the tests. The goal was, where is it best to place the AIO radiator? So he's not talking about the water block or the orientation of the tubes. He did not buy any additional fans. He had a 240 millimeter AIO, so that's two fans, plus he had two case fans as well, one on the top back, one on the back top, almost always, except for when he put the AIO on the top, in that case he moved the fan that was on top to the front. So he ran 10 minute runs, of Cinebench R23, which is the CPU multi-core plus 720p FurMark, which is a very demanding graphics test. He used the radiator fans fixed at 1500 RPMs, whereas I was doing my fans on a curve. He ran the case fans at 1250 RPM, fixed, where again I was doing my fans on a curve. I did Cinebench not R23, but I did Cinebench 2024 with the CPU multi core test. I did not use FurMark. He was trying to stress both the CPU and GPU at the same time. So that's why he used those two tests. I would assume at the same time. It doesn't state that clearly. The room temperature was measured about 30 centimeters from the PC case with a probe. System power was taken with a inline power meter, power plug with readouts. The case is a Corsair 4000D that he modified, so he calls it the 4500D. Every configuration was tested 3 times to eliminate strange spikes and other strange behaviors. The numbers in the result are an average of 3 runs for every configuration. Setup 7 was run without the top mesh due to how restrictive this was. More testing on that later, but that's specific to that particular setup. There are a total of 9 configurations and 2 bonus configurations in which he did something a little bit different with configuration number 1 and number 4. So here are some answers to questions you might have. Why only push on the fans to make the only variables the radiator location? Why the same fan speeds to make the only variables the radiator's location, or in versus out? Why only run push on the fans? He asks again. Well, he already answered that. I don't know why he repeated it. Why buy and mod a 4000D instead of buying a 5000D? The 4000D was available in a local small PC store, so fast delivery, plus I wanted to support my local store, which is nice. What is the mod? Side mount for radiator and mesh on the side panel. I named it at a 4500D. And then he wrote, "Don't sue me, Corsair," with a little emoji. Why run FurMark not on full resolution on the graphics card? To simulate a gaming load. Why only run 2 case fans and 4 in total? Using the fans from the case and the fans from the AIO was a combo I found to be a realistic scenario for many, if not most, users. which, and that makes sense. That's one of the reasons that I chose to only use one more fan, because a lot of times people don't have a lot of fans in their cases. What CPU was used? 7940X overclocked to 4.1 gigahertz. That's AMD, by the way. What cooler was used? The Cooler Master ML240L AIO. What GPU was used? A GTX 680. You didn't have anything newer. And that's pretty bad because I have the GTX 760 SC from EVGA, and wow, the scores were abysmal in Time Spy. But it did run. I cannot do a graphics test in Cinebench with that thing, but I can run it, the Time Spy test. So why 10-minute Cinebench R23 and firmware test? I found that with a 240 AIO at this heat load that he was reaching equilibrium after one Cinebench run. How about the intakes? Every intake has a mesh of some kind. Why is the CPU watt just approximately? My motherboard has never been able to report CPU watt power. What's up with the arrows in the pictures? It's to indicate if air has touched or moved over a heat-producing component. Blue for none, purple for 1, red for 2. I find that a little bit confusing. I have to refer back to that. Why is the heat load on the CPU so high? To eliminate margin of error and to highlight the extremes a bit, and CPUs are getting hotter and hotter. Now, one thing that he did that was significantly different from me was that he overclocked. I did not. Another thing that he did was he paid attention to wattage. I paid attention to CPU and thread usage as well as the clocks, the clock speeds. So he included 3 pictures of the case that he modified. It's black. And I think that he did a very good job of modifying that so that he could mount fans on the side there with mesh. It is a D, so it doesn't have any glass panels on the top and the front. And he also chose this deliberately because he knew I had the 5000X, which does use the glass panels, and he didn't want the glass panels in the way. In fact, he was trying to discourage me entirely when I was testing from using the glass panels. And I was like, no, some people are going to do it this way, so I'm doing it this way. I want realistic tests. I don't want lab results. Lab results mean nothing to me and nothing to most users. So finally he understood, and he got this 4000D and modified it. And I thought, great idea. And he did a very nice job. I will show you that. Now, some of the other things that he noted on this. Some of these are in line with what I have seen from other testers. The temperatures for top exhaust is higher than he suspected, and this can be down to 2 reasons. One, his test setup is limited in these runs to case fans plus the AIO. He also asked if anybody wanted him to use more or maybe less fans if it was more realistic. The other factor he suggests might be the reason for this is that the top mesh is very restrictive apparently on the 4000D, which is interesting because he doesn't show it in here. And I'm going to just have to take a look at that, because if it's like my 5000X, it's not as restrictive as the mesh that he's got installed on the side or the mesh that's on the front of my 5000X. Okay, so just looking through the images, and there are so many images that are just a waste because they're just showing lights, LEDs on stuff inside of, in the case, the components that are, and it's just not stuff that even comes with the 4000D. It's just trying to give people ideas on how they can make their 4000D look pretty. Now, that said, I'm a little bit confused because when I look at the top of the case, what I see appears to be a fairly dense dust filter. And that's not what I have on my case. On my case, the dust filter on the top is a little bit on the coarse side. The holes are a bit large. So it's more for exhaust, but you can use it for intake, although it's not a good idea based on my testing. The front filter, however, is denser than the top filter, so I'm not sure why he was worried about the top one and not the front one. And I see another picture here where I can see both the top and the front. They're both the meshes appear to be quite dense, and the mesh that he used on the side that he created appears, from my viewpoint, to not be necessarily the same density, but it's really hard to tell because there's no like direct comparison video or picture or anything like that. He's very camera shy. So yeah, there's all that. And again, when he was doing configuration number 7, he had to run the test without the mesh because it was restrictive. And there's other information, but he doesn't actually even know the specs for his fan. He pulled them from somewhere, and unfortunately, he can't tell. I tried finding specs for it. I found different resources, and it was not consistent as to like airflow, and it did not show the static pressure. So it was basically a bit of a problem, because really when you want to do testing, you should be aware of your airflow and your static pressure and your fan speed, which he is aware of. And for people who care about noise, you can care about that or not. That's not really relevant to this test, for him at least. So yeah, but nevertheless, the results are really quite interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up each of these configurations on the screen for you, and I'm going to put them in order. I'm going to have to rearrange this, and I'm going to put it in order on the screen so you can see for yourself the best configurations according to him. You can see where the AIO is. You can see where the fans are. You can see which direction the air is flowing, and so on. So let's go ahead and get to that part. Oh, by the way, and this is important to note, that the GTX 680 graphics card that he uses is a blower style, and that has an impact on how well it cools, how much space it takes up, and things like that, and where you can place it in the case without nearby objects impeding airflow to cool it off. Some of the things that I noticed immediately from looking at his results was it was a little bit confusing, because sometimes, well, let me put it this way. He has the room temperature, the package temperature maximum, the core temperature maximum, and then the CPU temperature without the room temperature. And he doesn't state whether that is package or core. However, it looks like it's the package temperature minus the room temperature. Package temperature is higher on the CPU than core temperature. So that's important, because core temperature is not going to be as impacted in the same way because it's deeper down. Anyways, he also tells what the maximum system wattage was, the GPU or graphics card wattage, the approximate CPU wattage, and the GPU temperature. So that was, very helpful. He took a bit of a different approach from me as far as what he recorded, because I did not look at wattage. I looked at clock speeds. I looked at CPU and thread usage instead. And he's got good reasons for what he did. I've got good reasons for what I did. I don't think that there's anything wrong with either of them. I think that both of us would have been better off if we had recorded all of those things. But yeah, that's okay. So I found that the images were just a little bit confusing for me sometimes. I did notice certain things like, let's see, some things that stand out in regards to airflow. And one of those is glass panels on the front and top of the 5000X, but not on the 4500D is his name. And tubes disrupting the airflow. Because if the tubes are in the way of the fans, it can disrupt the airflow. He used a large I used a large 3-fan graphics card, the XFX Speedster Merc 319 RX 6800 XT. He on an easy DIY fab adjustable vertical mount that sits on the PSU shroud. He used a blower style GTX 680. The testing I did was different from the testing that he did. I did tubes up and tubes down, push and pull, intake and exhaust. Eventually, I'll also do the graphics card plugged into the motherboard. I have the 760 plugged in right now. I'm just wondering if it's going to be good or bad, because it's going to be so different in terms of the results from my current card that I'm kind of feeling like, am I going to have to put this off until I can afford to buy something similar from for that's smaller or not so long? So I'm going to have to get some feedback. If you have any thoughts on that, that would be really helpful. Anybody, if you think that I can use this really old GTX 760 like you use the GTX 680 when my current testing results are all based on the XFX RX 6800 XT, or do I need to find a shorter, in terms of length, graphics card that is comparable to a 6800 XT? What do you think? Please let me know. It'd be very, very helpful. I did not repeat every test 3 times. I ran Prime 95 for 1 hour. I ran Cinebench it takes like 14 minutes to finish the CPU multi-core test. I ran Time Spy. That's like a 5-minute test. And again, I did all these different configurations to try and find out what really has the biggest impacts. And we discussed that, or I discussed that rather, in the previous videos that I already that I put up prior to this one. Also keep in mind, and I want to show you so you understand exactly what I'm talking about, that the mesh dust filters on my case are not all identical. So first of all, I'm going to show you the one that's on the front of my case. And this is it. So as hopefully you can see, it is a fairly densely knit or woven mesh filter. Okay, now that is that one. And then the one that's used for the side panel is like this. So it's got larger holes. And finally, the one that's on top looks like this. So if I hold these all up so you can compare them, which is a little bit challenging, but you can see that they are very different from each other. This is the finest holes, and then between these two, I would say that honestly, because these are triangular holes, they're a little bit bigger. I'm just not sure whether the air flows more easily through the triangular holes of this one or the round holes of this one. So those are the mesh panels that I deal with. Also, on the top and front, there are glass panels, and they look like this. They're different lengths because the top and the front are not the same length, but otherwise they're identical. And then on the side, there is a non-removable grill within which this one hides, mounted into it. And that is a plastic frame, and then the grill itself is metal, and it's got large holes. I can show you. Just give me a second here. Okay. And here's that. So those are really big holes. Now, if you are somebody with a pet, that's good. And having the glass panels over the dust filters means your cat or other animal that tends to be destructive is not going to destroy the dust filters. Because if they destroy the dust filters, they can destroy what's behind the dust filters, which is your fans, for example. Or if there's nothing behind the dust filter, they may be able to get inside your computer and short circuit the whole thing, and then you're out your computer. So this is one of the reasons I chose to test with the glass panels on. And then I decided, well, as I was finishing that up, I decided I'm going to also get some tests done where I remove the mesh, I remove the glass, I remove both, I block certain positions and see what happens. It just so happened that coincidentally this is when Kris came out with his test results. And now I've got more good news because another guy that I've been having a conversation with this about, he says he's going to do some testing as well. So I'm looking forward to him doing that and seeing what he comes up with. His name is Thrasher. And so, yeah, I'm going to put link below to the test results where they were posted on Linus Tech Tips forum. So you'll be able to find it and see for yourself. You'll see the conversation between myself and him and some of the other members, and even a couple, I think there's one or two moderators that got involved in the conversation a little bit. And, maybe you'll learn something from the stuff that's there. So let me go ahead and show you the actual pictures of his case and the different configurations from best to worst. And then I can talk a little bit more about how they differ from what I did. All right. So first of all, I want to show you the images from the Corsair website that demonstrate the density of the mesh as best as I can anyways on the case that he purchased. So if we zoom in here, we can see it's kind of hard to tell from this angle, but it looks like it's pretty dense, like the one that I have on my front case. And then we have this one, which also looks actually like the one that I have on the front of my case in terms of density. So maybe this one is even denser actually. Unfortunately, there's very little in the way of helpful pictures. Here's another shot of the front one. And so you can see that it is, pretty much the same as mine. But then trying to find a shot of the top, and that's again the front, is really like trying to find the proverbial needle in the haystack. The closest I could come was this one here. And that one actually looks, like the one that I have on the side. So I don't know why he said that was too dense, because that's actually got more airflow as far as I know than the mesh one. But I'm not really sure. I've never bothered to test them yet to see which one has better airflow. But that would be an interesting thing to know. So it's different, but it's the same. It's just he had to add on, and let me get to the pictures of what he did. So here we go with the right hand panel where he put this hole, and he mounted these two actually fan dust filters onto that position there, so that he'd be able to mount his 240 there. And you can see from the inside where that is. And also another view of that. And I think he did a pretty darn good job of mounting that in there. I'm not sure how he managed to cut that hole in there. I didn't ask him about that, but you can see that there isn't any such thing on the left-hand side, because this is, or sorry, the right-hand side. This is the right-hand side. So he managed to actually put a hole here on that. So that's all interesting. And now let's see. Let's take a look at the results. Again, this is the original document that he uploaded to Linus Tech Tips forum, showing the results for each configuration. So you can see that there are 3, 6, 9, 11 configurations. So let's go ahead and actually go through each of those configurations one at a time and see if we can pick out some details that'll be helpful for all of us. So here is the best configuration according to what he did. So he's got the radiator with the fans. Now notice the fans are in a push-pull configuration. When I say push-pull, that the reason there's 2 fans on each side is because he's got the outside fans pushing air through the radiator, and then he's got inside fans pulling air through the radiator, which combined does better than one set of fans. If he had just done pull fans on that, it wouldn't have done as well as just push fans, generally speaking, although it does depend on which fans you're using. Some fans are more appropriate for pushing, some fans are more appropriate for pulling. I don't understand the engineering behind that, but I have actually observed it in my testing. So yeah, so we can see here that the package temperature minus the room temperature of 24 degrees Celsius was only 57.7 degrees. That's pretty darn good. And that particular configuration under the test load consumed 449.3 watts. I would have loved to have known, like what the clock speed was or something like that, but that's okay. The GPU was consuming 95 watts. The CPU was consuming about 280 watts. The GPU temperature got up to 82.7, and that's not the delta temperature. That's 82.7 minus 24. All right, so that's the best one. Now the second best one. Wait a second. Oh my gosh. I think this is the second best one. Yes. Configuration number 1, we can see that in this case, whereas the best configuration was push-pull with both of these fans over up on the back exhausting air, this is just pushing the air through the radiator, and the fans on the back are exhausting air out, which is very exhausting. And we can see the room temperature was 24.8. The package temperature after subtracting room temperature was 60.9. Core temperature was 86. And system wattage was 44.9, 95 watts for the graphics card, 280 approximately for the CPU, and graphics card temperature, or GPU temperature, that is, was 82.3 minus the 24.8. And then the next best one was this configuration where he's got the fans pulling air in through the radiator, and the back fans are blowing air out or exhausting air. Room temperature 24.1. The CPU temperature at delta was 65.2. System wattage was higher at 453.3. GPU wattage was 95, 280, and 82.7. So that was number 3. Number 4, we can see that this was again push-pull. So he's got 2 fans pushing air through the radiator and 2 fans pulling air through the radiator. He's also got the 2 exhaust fans in the back. Room temperature was 24.2. The CPU's delta temperature was 66 degrees. So I organized these from the lowest CPU temperature to the highest. 453 system watts, 215 graphics GPU watts, and 218.3 CPU watts. Now the 5th best configuration in his testing was with the fans. Side fan. It was side mounted. Sorry, and the fans were exhausting air out through the radiator. And that's why you can't see all of the radiator. You can just see where the tubes are. So it was pushing the air out through the radiator mounted on the side, and the fans again are exhausting air out of the back. The room temperature was 25.2, so it was a little bit toastier that day, and the CPU delta temperature was 66.8. Now again, this is we're subtracting the room temperature, so it's higher not because the room temperature is higher, but because this was not working as well as the previous 4 configurations. The system wattage was 456, GPU wattage was 95, approximate CPU wattage was 280, and the GPU temperature was 84. And then the 6th best configuration was side mount radiator, again exhausting air through the radiator with the back fans intaking air. Now that was an interesting idea. I kind of like that. I kind of see where he's reversing the flow of the air to see what impact that has. So if we go back and forth between this one and that one, we can see this one ended up with a slightly higher delta temperature for the CPU of 67.1. Room temperature was 24.2. System wattage of 454.7 versus 456. GPU wattage was again, and CPU wattage were again the same, but the GPU temperature was 84 versus 83. And then the 7th best configuration was this one, where the radiator was mounted on the top with the fans exhausting air through the radiator out. He put one fan on the back intaking air, 1 fan on the front intaking air, and this one, interesting idea, 23.7 degrees in the room with a delta CPU temperature of 67.3. System watts dropped to 449.7, and the GPU temperature was 81.7. And then we can see that the next best one, the 8th best one out of the 11, was with the radiator on the top, with the fans pushing air through the radiator into the case. So the front fan is on intake, the back fan is on exhaust. This didn't work out particularly well. The room temperature was 24.3. The delta temperature of the CPU was 69.1. System wattage was 462, and the GPU temperature was 83. This is a little bit odd. I personally would have put the front fan on exhaust, but yeah. Then the 9th best one was the radiator back on the front with the fans exhausting air out through it, and the back fans were intaking air. 23.3 room temperature, 69.4 delta CPU temperature, 450 system watts, and 82 degrees for the GPU. And remember, GPU temperatures that's not delta, that's the raw temperature. And the 10th one out of 11, so one of the worst ones, was the radiator on the front with the fans pushing the air out through the radiator. 23.7 room temperature, 71.3 delta CPU temperature, 452 system watts, and 80 degrees for the GPU. And the absolute worst one was top mount. And this one, 24.5 room temperature. The top mount with the air being pushed out through the radiator, the front intaking, the back exhausting. And we have a CPU delta temperature of 73.2, system watts of 456.7, GPU temperature of 79.7. Now, these results, if you look at my screen over here, I'm going to make these bigger. These results are a bit different from the results that I got. Why do I say that? Well, if you look at it, you can see that the top two results that in his testing were intaking air, either in push or push-pull, through the front. And then with the next two that were the best, we had the radiator, or sorry, actually the next four, the radiator was on the side, and there was intake, and then there was intake push-pull, and then there was exhaust, and then again exhaust for that last one. Now, in my testing for the CPU, if we go back to that information, my testing, you have to sort that. Go with was it B and G? And my testing showed that the best one, and this was one of the special ones where the side was blocked, the top was open, the front mesh was on, and the glass was off. But setting aside that special one, the best three were all side mounts. The top two were exhaust. The third one was intake. Then front and side and front and side and side and side and side. And so top mount only came into play as amongst the worst ones. And inner was generally better at cooling off the CPU than sandwiching the fan between the case and the radiator. And then we get into top mounting, and we can see that consistently top mounting rated in the bottom 5. But two of the front ones also rated in the bottom 5. So we've got all three of the top mounts not doing well, but two of the front mounts not doing well because they're exhausting air. And if you look at my test results for front mount with exhausting air, all of my test mounts for exhausting air from the front, whether it was tubes down or tubes up, did poorly. We're talking about 68, 60, 67, 68, 71, 72 temperature. So that's delta temperature. So that was pretty darn hot. So we're seeing pretty similar things. So why is it that he has best results with front mount and I had best results with side mount? Well, number one, he did a push-pull on the very best one. I didn't do any push-pull. I did either push or pull, either intake or exhaust, all the combinations that I could possibly do. But the thing of it is he did with all of them with the tubes up, if I recall correctly. And then the front ones were the best because there was no glass panel in the way. There's no glass panel on the top. There was no glass panel on the front. And that changes the airflow because there's less restriction of airflow. And therefore, this demonstrates that there's nothing wrong with my results. There's nothing wrong with his results. It simply shows that when you have two cases that are very similar, but one has more restriction in one area, the other has more restriction in the other area, the fewer restrictions of airflow that you have, the better it will perform. If you have pets, you need those glass panels. If you don't have pets, you don't have small children who are going to take those dust things off, or they're going to stick their fingers into the fans and the fans broken so you can choose based on what is safe in your household. And again, if we have a very small case, I haven't gotten around to doing small case testing or mesh case testing and the other possibilities because for those small cases, I'm actually going to need a new CPU, a new graphics card. Well, maybe not a graphics card, but a CPU, motherboard, probably memory, and a bunch of other stuff that I'm going to have to buy. I do have a spare power supply, so I'll be able to use that, no problem. It's kind of overkill, but that's okay. Anyways, I hope that this helps you to understand why his test results are valid and my test results are valid, and how you can use all of these combined to better understand what's going to work best for cooling your CPU. If you have questions, please put them down below. NorKris is on YouTube pestering me all the time now with criticisms and stuff. But, maybe he can also respond to this video directly if you have questions for him. If he's not feeling shy. He's not particularly shy, so I think he'll be okay with that. But, yeah. And I'll put the link to his thread on LTT Forum. So you can go there if you want to participate there with him instead of here. And I will link to my release of information on Bleeping Computer, which is my blogging home for all things technical. And yeah, I hope this has been informative for you and that you can make use of this. And also you can try to use this knowledge and then look at the results from other reviewers who have done this kind of testing. MSI's done it. Bitwit's done it. There were some other guys, and I was like, no. I felt like they were really not understanding what they were talking about. They were making assumptions without having tested, it seemed like. But there were some others that did actually do testing and did actually have results that were similar to what Kris and I came up with. So you can look around and see what you find. So did I prove or disprove, as I set out, what MSI said was the best? Well, we can answer that question by going to the MSI article. If I can quickly find it for where is it? Bookmarks. Oh, good Lord. Where's my manage bookmarks? That'll be easier. Let's search MSI. Let's see. Well, that's not it. What about AIO? Nope, that is not it. Let's try it this way. Maybe I need to search differently. No, it's not saved. How can that be? AIO placement. Here it is. So according to MSI, if you go through, and there are some things that are lacking, but if you look at the results here, you can see that according to MSI, and they did not do side mount, and this is an old article from 2021. Okay, but if you look here, you can see that according to them, for the CPU, the best possible choice was front mount, and the AIO fan was on intake, the system fan was on exhaust, tubes were down. That's interesting. And then I believe the second best was front mount also, tubes down again, and AIO fan on exhaust, system fan on intake. So that's a little bit confusing. Let's see if we can zoom in on this. So we can, yeah, there we go. That's better. some of the arrows in these images are wrong. And so if we go back to the best one here on the bottom right corner, that has 82.4 for the CPU, we have air coming in from the AIO and going out through the top fans, there are 3 apparently, and 1 on the rear. And then the second best was this one on the top right corner, 85.3 degrees Celsius. I don't know if this is, I don't think this is delta, actually. I think this is just raw results. And again, the tubes are down, as with the one in the bottom right corner, but this time the air is being pushed. The first one, the air was being pulled through the radiator. This time the air is being pushed out the radiator. The fans on the top are pulling air in. The fans on the rear are blowing air out. So that was the second best option. And the third best option was top mount. And the fourth best option was top mount. And the fifth best option was front mount with the tubes up. So I don't know whether it's because my case has a side panel or their results are different because they have more fans than I have. There are so many variables involved here. I would have to run through at least 16 more tests to try and directly determine whether or not, and I would have to block the side. So I just, I'd have 4 fans in there plus a 240, and I'm not going to do a 240. I'm not going to buy a 240 just to do this. So again, the test results are a little bit different. Does this mean they're invalid compared to my results? No, it doesn't. Does it mean they're invalid compared to Kris's results? Well, what do you think? Do you think that we've got a push-pull on the front, we've got a pull on or a push on the front as the 2 best ones, and I think those are tubes up, if I remember correctly. So that doesn't really match what they've said here with this middle column. And then we've got the side mount, so we can ignore those because they didn't test side mount. But then we have top mount, and that's pushing air out and pushing air in. And we can see that, well, not exactly the same as what they did at MSI, where everything was with the fan on the inside of the radiator, and so it's not exactly comparable. Is it wrong? It's really kind of hard to say. And what do you think? I would like to know what you think. Do you see that the MSI results are usable or that they're flawed? At this point, I still believe that top mounting is not a good idea, whereas MSI is saying, well, it is, but then again, they don't have side mount. But then some of the worst temperatures were with some of these tubes up configurations and a tubes down configuration, so tell me what you think about this whole thing. I would really like to get your opinion on this, and hopefully from that we will be able to learn new things together. And I really appreciate you sitting through this really long video. Thanks so much, and please like, subscribe, and share. I'd like to thank Grindler at Bleeping Computer for allowing me to share my videos and posts on his website. Bleeping Computer has a lot of resources, including vetted programs, malware removal instructions, malware removal volunteers, other kinds of volunteers for IT, cybersecurity information, and more. It's a great place to go. Give it a try. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day.